Welcome to the 37th episode of the series Decolonizing the Mind, which is a sub-series on the future of the decolonial movement. And this is the last part of that sub-series dealing with the problem of organization. When you talk about organization of social struggle, you talk about power. So let's see how we deal with the question of power and then the question of organization. And I'll conclude with how I envision to move forward by reviving the spirit of the Bandung Conference of 1959. So, in social movement, if you want to change the world, you have to have an analysis of power, which you will confront in that change and how to deal with power. And uh, many of us who came out of the Marxist movement had a very clear idea of power and organization. In the Marxist analysis, power is linked to class struggle. So you're fighting an oppressive class, the capitalist class. They have the state power, they have the power in education, they have the military power. That's what you're fighting. And how do you fight it? And Marxism Leninism taught us that we create an instrument called the Vanguard Party, the Leninist Vanguard Party that then takes the lead in training people, call it cadre formation, training cadres, to prepare for the moment of revolution. So the whole purpose of organizational building is to build a party that might take part in elections as a tactic, but the strategic goal is a revolution that takes state power, puts it in the hand of the working class, oppressed classes, destroys the state structure of the ruling class. Now, I already spoke about the decline of Marxism, the pragmatic revival of Marxism. So, what is it that we can think of from another perspective in the theory of liberation when we talk about power? And here it is in my GTM view. If you talk power not in class terms, but in ethical terms. Because injustice is not particularly linked to class. It can be linked to class, but not by definition. It's linked to ethics. So take, for example, China as a country. China as a country is a class society. Even using Marxist concept of class, it's a class of people that owns the means of production, rich class. This class of people, the first class owns means of production and employs wage laborers. There's a class of self-employed entrepreneurs. There's a class of peasants owning land. There's a class of laborers having no means of production. So it's a class society, but not necessarily an unjust society if there's a government in place that doesn't work primarily for the ruling class, but for the population as a whole. Now, some might disagree with it, and the analysis of China is very important because if you see China as a capitalist class and you use the Marxist class analysis, then the Communist Party would be seen as an instrument of the capitalist class. How did they uplift 800 million people out of poverty in a very short time, in 4 decades, unheard of in human history? What role did the Communist Party play in it? So it's complex. So that's why I say in the DTM theory, we look at injustice and how power relates to injustice. Is power promoting injustice or is power fighting injustice And looking at the practical, empirical evidence of history, I don't agree that every class society is an unjust society. You could have a class society where government, I mentioned the example of China, you could have other examples, uh, can work, for example, Venezuela, where the government works in a class society, but for the benefit of the majority of the population. Second thing, when we look at power, is that ethics is not universal, it's depending on specific countries and communities. For example, take Iran. Uh, in Iran, you could see that ethics is based on Islamic ethics, different from Confucian ethics or Buddhist ethics or Christian ethics, you see. So it's not universal. So when you have a DTM strategy about changing power relations, you have to specify what will you change, how will you replace it. In Marxism, there was universal answer. It doesn't matter where you are, which country you are, as long as a class society, capitalist society, you have the instrument of a vanguard party and working for a revolution. But in DTM, we have to look at the specifics per country before you decide anything about what strategy fits that particular country. Now, the goal of social movements is to transform the current colonial world civilization to a new decolonial world civilization. That is how I define from a DTM perspective the goal of social movements. And the key element is the acknowledgement that colonization of the mind is instrumental in maintaining colonial power. And the mind of the people is colonized in various ways, so that any social struggle for changing the world is a struggle for changing the mind of the people. And once the mind has been decolonized, it will be much easier to organize social change by the people themselves. And then leadership will be very important. And leadership entails three dimensions. One is the ability to articulate a vision for the future. So a leader should be able to tell you where are we going, uh, what analysis do you have of the current stage which humanity is in and a particular country is in. Where do you want to bring that country? Where do you want to bring humanity? So articulating those ideas and vision and laying out a trajectory for the future, that is one important dimension of leadership. The second is the ability to organize and manage people and activities to achieve specific results. So it's not um, it's not just about saying where we go. You have to be able to put out concrete steps of what needs to be done, what kind of economic activities, political, social, cultural, where do we go? What are the projects to realize that vision for the future? And it might not be combined in one person. One part of the leadership could be very good in articulating a vision, others could be very good in organizing and managing people. So you need team building. And you need not only build a team for now, you need to build a team in such a way that you create the legacy of the vision, which means that you train already people for the future that replaces you. You can't build something that is built that is based only on your leadership. The best leadership is the one that puts institute in place to replace themselves. I must say the Cubans did quite a good job in it. After Fidel Castro stepped out of politics, many people thought that the Cuban society would fall apart. But it's just amazing to see how they have been able to organize the succession in terms of leadership. Now, in the when Lenin wrote what is to be done, the manual for building a Leninist vanguard party, he was in an era where technology was very low in development. They had to print newspaper on printing presses. Then, when it comes from the printing presses, you have to distribute it and sell it in factories and everywhere people were gathering. It requires quite a big thing. But now technology has broken the limitation of space time. So, anyone could come up with an idea and use technology to promote that idea. And while in former times, you need to go with your newspaper at a trade union meeting, try to convince people, and now just people on their telephone could get in touch with somebody who has interesting ideas. There are other limitations in technology, right? Because of the control of the big tech companies, but technologically speaking, it is possible. What in the past was impossible, that ideas could reach millions and billions of people in a very fast way. One of the problems we'll deal with leadership is that what kind of ideas are you promoting? If you promote this idea that your idea is the only one and the universal one, and it's my way or the highway, then that technology, etc., you know, doesn't lead necessarily to liberation. So, as I mentioned, the colonization of the mind is a big thing that takes place on the level of the production and the distribution of knowledge. Now, who produces knowledge? Now, in this world, are the universities and think tanks. They conduct research, produce knowledge. Then, on the other side, we have social movements, leaders of social movements. It could be, spiritual leaders, leaders growing out of social movements, and they produce concepts about social struggles can deviate fundamentally from contracts produced in academia. For example, if you look at social movements in the Black liberation struggles, Marcus Garvey, Malcolm X, these were not academics, but they produced very important concept of the colonization of the mind, how identity formation is influenced by colonialism, which you won't find in academic textbooks. And take, for example, in Iran, which is seen in the West as a backward, feudal, political system ruled by ayatollahs. But if you study these ayatollahs, Khamenei, Khamenei now, go to their websites, their books, a lot of it in English, you'll find very anti-imperialist, anti-colonial concepts, but then developed within the Islamic context. And they have artists. Bob Marley, for example, his song, Redemption Song, is the best articulation of mental slavery and how it works and the need to emancipate yourself from mental slavery. So we know where to look for ideas, we know where to look for fishes, we know where to look for how the mind has been colonized and how power works and how justice works. The biggest thing in organization building is that there's not one type of organization. There are different types of organizations that could be built. A mosque could be a center of decolonizing the mind. Just any group formed by individuals could be one. A cultural center. So there's not a specific one, but for example, like in China, you have the Communist Vanguard Party there as an instrument that is still there. Whatever the organizational instrument, you will need some kind of capacity building and building leaderships and cadres for social struggle. And then it comes to developing curriculum from a DTM perspective, developing a curriculum based on DTM, how DTM is used in the classroom, how you develop a guide for decolonizing disciplines, how to produce new textbooks. These are things which will be on the agenda. And it's long overdue because Already in 1955, newly independent African nations and leaders from liberation movements came together in the Indonesian city of Bandung to carve out a new trajectory beyond capitalism and socialism. And in the final declaration, they said, Asia and Africa have been the cradle of great religions and civilizations which have enriched other cultures and civilizations while themselves being enriched in the process. Thus, the cultures of Asia and Africa are based on spiritual and universal foundations. Unfortunately, contacts among Asian and African countries were interrupted during the past centuries. The peoples of Africa and Asia are now animated by a keen and sincere desire to renew their old cultural contexts and develop new ones in the context of a modern world. So, reviving the spirit of Bandung is one of the major challenges in building a new world civilization, which is the ultimate goal of DTM. So, in the last chapter, chapter 13, I deal with all these issues, less with the issue of organization, but more of the issue of long term vision and strategy. If you want to download this presentation, go to the website and you can find a PDF. If you want to support the channel, subscribe to it, share it with friends, families, and colleagues, and encourage them to subscribe. Get involved in discussion groups, and if you want to make a donation, go at sanduhira.com to see how you can do it. Thank you for your attention.